I was knee-deep in manure when I heard the rumble of the bulldozer. At first, I thought my neighbor Dale was finally clearing that eyesore of a fallen oak near our shared property line. But when the engine roar grew louder and dust clouds billowed over my east pasture, I knew something was wrong. I dropped my shovel and ran toward the noise, my boots squelching through mud as I rounded the corner of my barn, my grandfather's barn, just in time to see a massive yellow bulldozer taking aim at its weathered red walls. "Hey!" I screamed, waving my arms frantically. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The bulldozer operator, a bored-looking guy in a hard hat, killed the engine and climbed down. "Orders from Westfield Estates HOA. This structure's been marked for demolition." My heart nearly stopped. "This isn't even part of Westfield Estates. This is my property, Spencer Drake's property. I don't belong to any HOA." The guy shrugged, pulling a crumpled work order from his pocket. "Says here all structures on Lot 15 need to come down by end of day. Something about code violations. Lot 15 is over there." I pointed toward the newer development visible through the trees. "This is my family farm. Been here 80 years before your fancy subdivision existed." I snatched the paper from his hand, my blood pressure climbing as I read the letterhead, Westfield Estates Homeowners Association. And there at the bottom was a signature I'd come to despise, Deborah Danvers, HOA President. The same woman who'd been trying to force me to sell my remaining 5 acres for the past 3 years. The same woman who'd called county inspectors on me 9 times for eyesores, like my tractor and chicken coop. The same woman who acted like my modest family farm, whittled down from 50 acres after my grandfather's medical bills, was a personal insult to her vision of suburban paradise. "You need to leave," I told the operator. "Now. Before I call the sheriff." He looked uncertain, glancing between me and his bulldozer. "Lady's gonna be pissed." "Not my problem," I said, already dialing the sheriff's office. What I didn't know then was that Deborah Danvers' attempted bulldozing of my barn would set off a chain of events that would reveal just how far she'd go to get what she wanted, and just how valuable my stubborn little farm really was. I've spent my whole life on this land. After 2 tours in Afghanistan and a medical discharge that left me with a titanium rod in my leg and nightmares I don't talk about, coming home to the family farm was my salvation. I started a small organic vegetable business, just enough to keep the property taxes paid and put food on my own table. I wasn't bothering anyone. At least, that's what I thought. The trouble began 3 years ago, when developers bought Old Man Pritchard's failing dairy farm that bordered my property to the west. Within months, they transformed rolling pastures into cookie-cutter houses with pretentious names like the Edgewood and the Belmont. They called it Westfield Estates, though there wasn't much estate about houses crammed on quarter-acre lots. I minded my own business until Deborah Danvers knocked on my door with a fruit basket and a contract. "We would love to incorporate your charming property into our community planning," she said, her pearl earrings catching the light as she tilted her head. She was dressed like she was heading to a country club luncheon, hair perfectly styled, not a wrinkle in her cream-colored pantsuit. "Not interested," I told her, though I accepted the fruit basket. No sense in letting good food go to waste. "You haven't even heard our offer, Mr. Drake." Her smile never reached her eyes. "Westfield Developers is prepared to be quite generous." The offer wasn't generous. It was insulting. They wanted my land for half its market value, claiming the inconvenience of working around an existing structure reduced what they could pay. "This land's not for sale at any price," I said, returning the contract and signed. "It's been in my family for generations." That's when her smile disappeared entirely. "I understand sentimentality, Mr. Drake, but progress is inevitable. That quaint little farm of yours is going to look quite out of place surrounded by our luxury community." "Then your luxury community should have picked a different location," I replied, closing the door on her perfectly made-up face. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. First came the letters about my non-conforming structures. Then noise complaints about my rooster. Then claims that my property lines were incorrectly drawn. Each time, I had to dig through files, produce surveys, and prove that her HOA had absolutely no jurisdiction over my land. But nothing prepared me for the bulldozer. After I sent the operator packing, I drove straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Taylor had known my family for years, had even helped my grandfather round up escaped cattle when I was a kid. "She did what now?" he asked, leaning forward in his creaky office chair. I slapped the work order on his desk. "Tried to demolish my barn. Says right here it was authorized by the HOA." Sheriff Taylor studied the paper, his weathered face growing increasingly concerned. "This is troubling, Spencer. The property lines are clear as day. She has no authority outside her development." "Tell that to her bulldozer," I said. "I'll have a word with Mrs. Danvers," he promised. "In the meantime, document everything. Take photos of any equipment they bring onto your property." I left feeling somewhat reassured, but my relief was short-lived. The next morning, I awoke to find survey stakes driven into my east field, the one with my best topsoil, and orange spray paint marking a line straight through my vegetable garden. I followed the markings to their source and found a county water utility truck parked near my property line. A worker in a high-visibility vest was consulting a map. "What's going on?" I asked. He looked up, seemingly surprised to see me. "Emergency water line installation. Got the work order yesterday." "On my property? Without my permission?" He frowned. "Says here we have right-of-way access." He showed me his tablet. "Signed by the property owner." My signature was on the form. Except it wasn't my signature. "That's forgery," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "I never signed anything." The worker looked uncomfortable. "Look, man, I just go where they tell me. You'll need to take this up with the county." "Oh, I will," I promised. That afternoon, I found myself sitting across from Linda Martinez at the county utilities office, watching her face grow increasingly troubled as she reviewed the documentation. "This doesn't make sense," she said, clicking through screens on her computer. "According to our records, we received an easement request from Westfield Estates 2 months ago, claiming they needed emergency access to install a community water supply line. The paperwork indicates all affected property owners had signed off." "Well, I didn't," I said flatly. Linda's eyes narrowed. "The request was processed by—" She paused, checking the record. "Teresa Collins. She's relatively new. Let me guess, friends with Deborah Danvers?" Linda's silence was confirmation enough. "There's something else," she said slowly. "The water line they're installing isn't just any line. It's the main supply conduit for the entire new development." "What does that mean?" "It means," Linda said, "that whoever controls that easement essentially controls water access to over 200 homes." I sat back, stunned. "So they forged my signature to put their community's water supply on my land?" "It appears so. And if this is unauthorized, you have every right to deny access." She looked troubled. "Though that would leave a lot of families without water." I stared out the window, thinking. Those families didn't do anything wrong. It's their HOA president I have a problem with. "For what it's worth," Linda added, "the original water line was supposed to follow the county road, but it would have cost Westfield developers an additional $300,000 for the proper permits and construction. This route through your property was their cheaper alternative." The pieces were falling into place. Deborah hadn't just been harassing me for fun, she needed my land for their water infrastructure. The HOA was just her weapon of choice. "I need copies of everything," I told Linda. "And I'd appreciate if you'd hold off on any more work until this is sorted out." She nodded. "I'll flag the permit as disputed. That should halt operations temporarily." I drove home with a growing sense of both outrage and opportunity. When I pulled into my driveway, a silver Mercedes was parked beside my weathered pickup truck. Deborah Danvers leaned against it, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes, arms crossed over her expensive blouse. "Mr. Drake," she called as I got out. "I think it's time we had a serious conversation. About how you tried to bulldoze my barn." Or about how you forged my signature on county documents? I asked, not bothering to hide my anger. Because both of those sound like criminal offenses to me. Her smile didn't waver. Misunderstandings, I assure you. Paperwork gets mixed up. Contractors receive unclear instructions. Cut the crap, Deborah. I know about the water line. I know you need my land. For just a moment, her composure slipped. Then she recovered, removing her sunglasses to reveal cold blue eyes. Let's be practical. Your little farm, she pronounced the word like it tasted bad, is an anomaly. An eyesore surrounded by progress. We're offering you a chance to profit from inevitable change. By forging documents and trying to demolish my property? She waved a dismissive hand. Aggressive negotiation tactics. I'm prepared to offer you 30% more than our original proposal. I laughed. The original offer was an insult. 30% more is still an insult. Don't be difficult, Mr. Drake. That water line is going in whether you like it or not. The county has already approved the project. Based on forged documents, I reminded her. Her eyes narrowed. Do you really want to fight the entire Westfield Estates community? 200 families? What do you think will happen when they learn one stubborn farmer is preventing them from having running water? I think they'd be more interested to learn their HOA president committed fraud, I replied. Now get off my property. She slipped her sunglasses back on. This isn't over, Mr. Drake. As her Mercedes disappeared down my gravel driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much worse before they got better. I was right. The next morning, I woke to find a notice from the county taped to my front door. My property was being inspected for agricultural code violations following multiple community complaints. The inspector would arrive in 3 days. I spent those days cleaning up every inch of my farm, though there wasn't much to fix. I ran a clean operation. Still, I knew from farmer friends that if someone wanted to find violations, they could always invent something. The morning of the inspection, a county truck pulled up, and a tired-looking man in khakis climbed out. He introduced himself as Gary Wilson and seemed embarrassed by the whole situation. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Drake, he said as we walked the property. We've received 17 complaints about this farm in the past week. All from the same email address. Let me guess, Deborah Danvers? He didn't confirm or deny, but his expression told me everything. The complaints range from improper waste management to illegal structures to contaminated runoff affecting the water table. All false, I said. Gary nodded, making notes on his tablet. I can see that. Your operation is one of the cleanest small farms I've visited. He hesitated. Between us, this isn't the first time we've had complaint clusters targeting specific properties near new developments. Harassment by inspection, I muttered. That's one way to put it. He completed his walkthrough, finding no violations. Before leaving, he paused. Just so you know, there's a zoning commission meeting next Tuesday. Westfield Estates has petitioned to have your property rezoned from agricultural to residential. Might want to attend. My stomach dropped. Can they do that without my consent? Gary looked uncomfortable. Technically, the commission can rezone if they determine it serves the greater community interest. But you'd have a chance to appeal. After he left, I called my cousin Diane, who happened to be a real estate attorney in the next county over. They're coming at you from all angles, she said after I explained the situation. The bulldozer, the forged easement, the inspections, and now rezoning. Classic developer tactics to force a holdout to sell. What can I do? Document everything. And I mean everything. Get statements from the bulldozer operator and the utility worker. Request copies of all complaints filed against your property. Pull the county records for the water line approval. She paused. And Spencer, you might want to talk to your neighbors in that development. I bet most of them have no idea what their HOA is doing. It was solid advice. That evening, I drove to Westfield Estates and parked in front of a house where a man was watering his lawn. Hi there, I called, approaching with a friendly wave. I'm Spencer Drake. My farm borders your development. The man smiled. Sam Thompson. Nice to meet you. We can see your red barn from our back deck. My kids love it, feels like real country living. I spent the next hour talking to Sam and learning some interesting things. The residents had been told their water connection was delayed due to county permitting issues. Most had no idea the line was supposed to go through my property. And when I mentioned Deborah Danvers, his expression darkened. Between us, most people here can't stand her, he confided. HOA fees keep rising, but nobody sees where the money goes. She fines people for ridiculous things like having the wrong shade of beige curtains visible from the street. Would you be willing to tell me more about how she runs things? I asked. Sam hesitated, then nodded. Come to our neighborhood barbecue Saturday. Lots of folks would probably talk to you, especially if Deborah's not around. That Saturday changed everything. I met dozens of Westfield residents who shared similar stories about Deborah's tyrannical rule. Lisa Jenkins showed me a $250 fine for planting unapproved flowers. Michael Grayson had been ordered to remove a small memorial flag honoring his son who died in military service because it wasn't an approved decoration. But the most important person I met was Teresa Collins, the same county employee who had processed the forged easement documents. She lived in Westfield Estates and served as the HOA treasurer. I thought the paperwork was legitimate, she insisted nervously when I cornered her by the dessert table. Deborah assured me all signatures were properly obtained. Did you verify that? I asked. She looked away. I trusted her. She's my boss at the county too, she got me the job. The pieces clicked together. So Deborah works for the county and pushed this paperwork through using an employee who reports to her? Teresa nodded miserably. I could lose my job if this comes out. Or you could come clean now, I suggested. Before it gets worse. By the end of the barbecue, I had contact information for 38 homeowners willing to speak about Deborah's mismanagement, and a potential witness in Teresa who might confirm the document fraud. The next blow came Monday morning, the day before the zoning commission meeting. I was checking my irrigation system when Sheriff Taylor's cruiser rolled up my driveway. Spencer, he said grimly as he got out. We've got a problem. What now? Got a report that you threatened Deborah Danvers. She's filed for a restraining order, claiming you've been harassing her and intimidating Westfield residents. I stared at him in disbelief. That's absurd. I was just at their neighborhood barbecue. Ask anyone there. I believe you, he said. But there's a hearing scheduled for next week, and until then, you need to stay at least 500 feet away from her. The zoning commission meeting is tomorrow, I pointed out. She'll be there. Sheriff Taylor sighed. Then you'll have to submit your statement in writing or send a representative. Deborah had outmaneuvered me again. Without me at the meeting to defend my property, the commission would likely approve the rezoning. I called Diane immediately. She can't do that, my cousin fumed. A restraining order requires evidence of actual threats or harassment. Doesn't matter if it's eventually thrown out, I said. It keeps me from attending tomorrow's meeting. Not necessarily, Diane said thoughtfully. I'll represent you at the commission meeting. And I think we should bring some friends. The next day, I watched from my truck parked legally outside the 500-foot boundary as Diane strode into the county building. Behind her walked Sam Thompson, Teresa Collins, and 26 other Westfield Estates residents. From my distant vantage point, I couldn't hear what transpired, but 3 hours later, Diane emerged with a triumphant smile and a thumbs up. She called me immediately. The commission tabled the rezoning request pending investigation, she reported. Teresa testified about the forged easement documents, and the other residents presented a petition opposing the rezoning of your farm. You should have seen Deborah's face. What about the water line? That's the best part, Diane said. The commission has ordered a full review of the water line permit. In the meantime, no construction can proceed without your explicit written consent, notarized and verified in person by the county clerk. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. But I knew Deborah wouldn't give up easily. I was right. 2 days later, my barn caught fire. It was 3 in the morning when my dog's frantic barking woke me. Through my bedroom window, I saw the orange glow. I called 911 while pulling on boots and rushed outside with my fire extinguisher, a pitiful defense against flames already consuming the east wall of the century-old structure. The volunteer fire department arrived within 15 minutes, but by then, half the barn was gone. As dawn broke, I stood in my muddy yard, watching firefighters spray down the smoldering remains of my grandfather's barn. The sheriff approached, his face grim. "Spencer, the fire chief found something. They're pretty sure this was arson." He led me to where the chief was bagging evidence, a gas can that wasn't mine and traces of accelerant splashed in a deliberate pattern. "Someone wanted this to burn," the chief confirmed. I didn't have to guess who. But proving it would be another matter. Later that day, as I was sorting through the charred remains, saving what tools and equipment I could, a blue pickup truck I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. A man in his 60s got out, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Drake? I'm Roy Winters. I work security at Westfield Estates. Bit far from your patrol area," I noted. He shifted his weight. "That's why I'm here. I saw something last night I think you should know about." Roy had been making his rounds when he spotted Deborah Danvers' Mercedes leaving the community at 2:15 a.m. It struck him as odd, so he noted it in his log. When he heard about my barn fire, he put 2 and 2 together. "I can't prove she came here," he said. "But there's not much reason for our HOA president to be driving around at that hour. Would you be willing to tell that to Sheriff Taylor?" I asked. Roy hesitated. "I need this job, Mr. Drake." "But—" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thumb drive. "Our gate camera captures every vehicle entering and leaving. I made a copy of last night's footage." It wasn't definitive proof, but it was something. I thanked Roy, who left quickly, clearly worried about being seen at my property. That evening, Diane arrived with reinforcements, her paralegal and a private investigator friend. "This has gone beyond harassment to criminal behavior," she said. "We need to build a case the district attorney can't ignore." The PI, a retired detective named Marcus, examined the fire scene with professional interest. "Amateurish work," he concluded. "Whoever did this was angry, not experienced. They left evidence everywhere." "But can we prove Deborah did it?" I asked. "Maybe not directly," Marcus said. "But we can establish opportunity with the security footage." "And motive?" "You've got that in spades." Over the next week, we assembled our case. Teresa provided copies of the forged easement documents. Sam and other residents testified about Deborah's obsession with acquiring my property. The gate footage showed her car leaving at 2:15 a.m. and returning at 3:30 a.m., plenty of time to drive to my farm, start the fire, and return. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected source. Deborah's assistant at the county, a nervous young man named Kevin, contacted Diane. "I've been helping Mrs. Danvers organize documents for some private business venture," he explained when we met at a coffee shop 2 towns over. "I found these in her desk while looking for budget files." The papers he provided were devastating. A private agreement between Deborah and Westfield developers outlining a kickback scheme. For every acre of my land she helped acquire, she would receive a $50,000 consulting fee. There was also a detailed plan for forcing my compliance, including steps like code enforcement pressure, infrastructure leverage, and, chillingly, remove agricultural structures. "She left this in her desk?" I asked incredulously. Kevin shrugged. "She's not used to people saying no to her. I don't think she ever considered someone might look." Armed with this evidence, we went to the district attorney. 3 days later, Sheriff Taylor arrived at my farm with news. "Deborah Danvers was arrested this morning," he announced. "Charges include forgery, fraud, arson, and criminal conspiracy. The DA's particularly interested in the kickback scheme, since it involves her position at the county." Relief flooded through me. What about the water line? That's a bit more complicated, the sheriff admitted. The line itself was properly engineered and would benefit the community. The county's proposing a legitimate easement agreement, with fair compensation to you. They'd like to negotiate. I considered this. I'm not opposed to the line itself. It's the strong-arm tactics I objected to. In the end, I negotiated a fair easement agreement that protected my farm while allowing the water infrastructure to proceed. The county paid market rate for the land use, plus additional compensation for the destroyed barn. I insisted on one unusual condition: as the property owner granting the easement, I retained the right to monitor and inspect the water line where it crossed my property. It's not standard, the county attorney had said. Neither is having your barn burned down, I'd replied. 6 months later, life had settled into a new normal. My barn was rebuilt, better than before, with an apartment loft I could rent out for extra income. Deborah Danvers had accepted a plea deal to avoid a longer prison sentence, with 5 years behind bars and restitution to both me and the Westfield community for misappropriated HOA funds. The most satisfying change was my relationship with my neighbors. Without Deborah's reign of terror, the Westfield residents elected a new HOA board focused on community building rather than petty rules enforcement. They even organized volunteer days to help with my barn raising, and I supplied their community garden with seedlings from my greenhouse. As for the water line, it functions perfectly, delivering clean water to all those homes just as planned. The only difference is that now, a small monitoring station sits on my property, giving me oversight of the system that Deborah had tried to force through illegally. Sam Thompson jokes about it when he visits to buy my organic tomatoes. So technically, you control the water supply for our entire neighborhood? Only in emergencies, I assure him. And I promise not to abuse the power. Unlike some people we could name. Sometimes, as I'm working in my fields, I look over at the thriving development next door and reflect on how differently things could have turned out. If Deborah had approached me honestly from the beginning, offering fair compensation and respect, I might have willingly accommodated their needs without all the drama. Instead, her greed and arrogance cost her everything: her position, her freedom, and whatever reputation she once had. As for me, I still have my family farm, now protected by ironclad legal agreements against future development pressure. The barn my grandfather built stands again, renewed and stronger than before. And every time I walk past the small water monitoring station at the edge of my property, I smile at the irony. Deborah thought she could bulldoze her way through my life to get what she wanted. Instead, she ended up giving me exactly what I needed: security, fair compensation, and the legal right to make sure no one can ever threaten my home again. Some might call it justice. I just call it karma.